Hi, Hans.
Hello, Sylvain.
So you're happy to be part of the judges at the International Whiskey Competition?
Yeah, I felt very honored to be invited here. We travel a lot to the US anyway because of my wife's background. She's American. So we already do a lot of things in the US with whiskey, bourbon as well as single malt. So it was nice to go more up north because we usually stay in the southeast of the US.
And with your wife you call yourself the whiskey couple. Could you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, when we met I was already heavily involved in whiskey writing and tasting. And I think the second question I asked my wife was, do you like whiskey? And she said, yes, Talisker. I thought, well, that's quite a recommendation. So we hit it off from there. And Becky wanted to move to Europe anyway. And I said, well, I could always use a pair of extra hands. And are you interested in helping me with editing my books, editing my articles, and doing some research? So
that's
she
great.
agreed. But we alternate between the US and Europe. And just one time for fun, Becky left a message on our voicemail in Europe. Well, here's the whiskey couple again. We're in the US currently. We won't use this number. It was meant as a joke, but the name stuck to it. So we are now known as the whiskey couple all over the world.
Oh, that's very interesting. And back to you. Where, how did your passion for whiskey came from?
Well, when I finished high school, a friend of mine offered me a little glass of amber liquid. I'd never drunk any hard liquor. I drank occasional beer after a soccer or tennis match.
Yeah.
But I looked at it and I sipped and it went down and I said, wow, this is it. From there on I started my lifelong quest and I'm still learning. I've been doing that for 35 years now. First it was tasting, asking questions, traveling to Scotland, meeting fellow writers who are all very helpful and they wanted to help me understand what the drink was all about.
So on top of being a master whiskey taster, you're also an acclaimed author on whiskeys precisely, and this is your last book, Whiskey and Jazz. Can you please?
I would refer to it as my latest book. It would be my last book.
Okay.
I would feel very happy.
I'm sorry, yeah, your latest book, and it's still in progress, and you're still here. I mean, so.
No, Whiskey and Jazz is actually it's part of a series. A couple of years ago I thought I want to do something with whiskey and the senses. I want to do a book on nosing and tasting, not your emptiest tasting guide because there's so many around. And I want to do a book on whiskey and listening, whiskey and looking, whiskey and feeling. So the first one I did was about whiskey and food,
Okay.
which is called The Taste of Whiskey. And the second one is Whiskey and Jazz. And I was talking with
some beautiful picture.
Thank you. I discussed the idea with the late Michael Jackson, who was a good friend of ours. I translated his books into Dutch. And, Michael was also a lover of jazz, and we both enjoyed the bebop style. So I said to him, if I want to do something with whiskey and music, shall we go down the route to jazz? And he said, that's a good idea, Hans. But unfortunately, he died before the book came into fruition. So I decided to dedicate the book to him.
Yes, I noticed, and Dave Broom wrote a nice foreword to the book where, I mean, you guys have a special relationship with Michael Jackson, and I'm sure you would have appreciated since he was a big jazz fan.
Yeah, well, I believe he has a copy in heaven. So you can enjoy it.
May he rest in peace. And there's also your other book, A Taste of Whiskey. And tell us more about this one.
Well, that was the first one in the series, and what I wanted to do is take the whiskey lover by the hand and guide him through a distillery with pictures as well as text and explain which aromas come into being during the process of making a whiskey. And also explain to people how they can learn how to discern flavors and aromas themselves. And you can use very complex models that the industry uses, like the Penton flavor wheel. But I show them there's another way you can simplify it without losing anything. So that was the second thing I wanted to do with the book. Tell everybody you can learn this, and maybe one has a better nose than the other, but still you can get some tools to develop your own sense of smell and taste.
So demystifying the world of whiskey. So if you're a newbie or you want to learn more, I mean, you don't have, it's possible the road to become a whiskey expert. I mean, the key is really to keep tasting, and you know.
There will always be a difference between amateur, and amateur means literally a lover of something.
That's true. Yeah, I agree.
Which is a very, if you're a whiskey amateur, that's a compliment. You're a whiskey lover. I tend to make a distinction between the amateur and the professional. I wouldn't call myself a whiskey expert. I think the real experts are the guys who make the whiskey. But I was happy to tell people and to write about it, because these experts were willing to share their knowledge with me.
Correct, the master distillers.
So I prefer to be called a whiskey writer and not a whiskey expert. But in writing such a book, you have to do a lot of research, amongst which liquid research is the one I like very much. And you become knowledgeable, and I found out on the way that I have a more than average talent for smelling. And I must say the other half of the whiskey couple is far better even. That he has an excellent sense of taste and smell. But I wanted to do more with the book, give some hands and feet to it. So the last section of the book is I singled out 10 single malts, and I asked 4 chefs in 4 different countries to prepare a 10-course dinner with these 10 single malts.
That's very interesting.
So there's a French, a Belgian, a Dutch, and a Scottish chef.
Brilliant.
And I hope they would all take an entirely different approach, which happened. So there's not only the menus in the book, but also, in their own words, they describe why they made these 40 different whiskey and food pairings.
Oh, what a novel idea.
Yeah, and that made the book even more accessible, because I think wine is nice, but I'm not a grape guy. I enjoy the grain far more. But the flavors in whiskey are so complex, and they can be so beautifully combined with all kinds of food, from desserts, soups, cheeses, venison, fish. It's the whole range. And Becky, who is a marine biologist by origin, we always joke about it because she's very good at pairing food and seafood and whiskey. So. And
are you cooking with whiskey as well?
Yeah, but you have to be careful with what you do with cooking with whiskey, because you're after the flavors. So don't do any flambe, because everything will go away. But you can marinate in whiskey, you can inject whiskey, you can spray whiskey over food. You can do very nice things with it. But it can also be a very good accompaniment in the glass, so you won't put it in the actual food, but you drink the whiskey with the food.
I see.
And all these examples are in A Taste of Whiskey.
And what's your new project out there? Are you writing a new book?
Well, yes, I'm currently working on the 3rd part of the series of Whiskey and the Senses, which is called Whiskey and Architecture. What I want to do is show throughout the ages the influences on architecture in the way whiskey is produced, but also the socio-economic aspects. Like when the railroads came to Scotland,
yep.
they could suddenly use coal instead of peat as fuel.
Correct.
And that's only one thing I can mention. There are a lot of things that happened from, say, the mid-18th century up to the 21st century. So I chose 10 different distilleries from the late 18th up to the 21st century. They'll be photographed by an expert photographer, and I will explain how they were built, and I will also tell about the lives and times of the great architects like Charles Doig and Delmay Evans who built these these distilleries. That's the one project. The other one, and I'm halfway with it, when I did Whiskey and Jazz, which is published by an American publisher, I felt I should also do something with blues, which is also a big thing for me. So being in Chicago, this is a wonderful thing. Yesterday evening we went to a blues bar. It's just up the road here. It's called
The House of Blues?
No, it's called Blue Chicago.
Blue Chicago, I know.
Of course, there's Buddy Guy's here, which is a famous icon over here. But I felt I should do something with the blues too, so I just finished the first draft of the manuscript called Bourbon and Blues.
Bourbon and Blues, wow.
That will be the next 2 projects.
That's very good. Proud that you are here, and I wanted to say that if you vote online, well, 5 people will actually throughout the world have a chance to win your book, Whiskey and Jazz. So thank you very much for being with us in Chicago for the 2010 International Whiskey Competition, and I'm gonna wish you a very nice continuation with us. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you very much, Silva.
Thank you for your time.
Bye all.